you're gonna go to sleep, don't fall out of your chair and get hurt, so we'll have a workers' comp claim, okay? Just lay your head on the person beside of your shoulder. You got to, you know. We'll see how that works. All right. Yeah, we're going to do asbestos awareness training. This is one of those things that's required that we do every year. You know, we're going to talk about the hazards, you know, what's the potential health hazards of asbestos. You know, where you're likely to see it. We'll talk about how it is unpredictable. And we're going to talk about the rules and regulations that regulate it. They are regulated by OSHA. There's a standard out there that tells us what we have to do. You know, it says that the employer shall provide at no cost to employees who perform housekeeping operations where there's potential or is asbestos present to have a asbestos awareness training. That's what I'm doing here today. And we're going to talk about as we go along through here. Like I say, this has to be done on an annual basis. About how to protect yourself when you do come across asbestos. Many years ago, they started banning this stuff. They started realizing it was a problem, so you can see some of the regulations, the EPA and some of the other agencies started banning these things. 1973, the spray-on fireproofing insulation. 1975, the wet application. 1978, banned spraying applied surfaces for fireproof and decoration purposes. You know, what is asbestos? It is a fire-resistant, has fire-resistant properties, and it's been known since as far back as ancient times. So it's been used for a long time. The Greeks used it in lamps. They used it in tablecloths. It was also found in the Egyptian burial cloths. So you can see over 5,000 years ago, they were using asbestos in some form. They found out that, you know, in the burial cloths that it would last, and so because it's pretty much indestructible. What is asbestos? This is what it looks like when they, or one of the forms, there's different forms of it, when they dig it out of the ground, that's what it looks like. It is a natural mineral, it comes out of the ground. It's still mined in some countries. I don't think the United States still mine it, but it was mined, actually mined in the southeast years ago. It was deposited in the southeast and northeast, and out in the west. There's places out there that they were mining. There's different kinds of it, but they were mining it, you know, back in the 20s, the 30s, and 40s probably. And they stopped sometime around the 60s or early 70s. They stopped mining stuff in the United States. It talks about what it looks like. It's long, thin, it has strong fibers that's in it. It's resistant to heat, and it's resistant to chemicals. It was deemed years ago, probably in the early 20s and 30s, as being a miracle fiber because they actually put it in material that people actually wore. Asbestos was actually in some of their garments that they made back then because it wouldn't wear out. It would just last and last and last. So, this is something that, you know, I don't expect anybody to remember the different categories. In fact, I don't even go into the categories because, you know, it kind of gets complicated when you start talking about the different categories, but really it's just, you know, is there asbestos there, and, you know, what the hazard associated with it, and how do you protect yourself from asbestos. But there are 6 different types. Like I say, a different type of asbestos comes from a different part of the country. That's where certain parts of the country has different types of it. There's 6 of them, and they're divided up into 2 main groups. It talks about their asbestos as a form of complex silicates, and we look at, they're broken into tiny fibers, and one thing about asbestos, these tiny fibers, you can't really see them sometimes. we could have them floating around in the room here, and because they're so small, sometimes they're so small you can't really see them, you can't really identify them because they're so tiny. It says they're 700 times smaller than human hair, so to give you an idea of what the size of it that they are. They can be, just a few of them can be so fine that you wouldn't see them. Now, when you get a lot of asbestos together, broken up, you can recognize it. Some of the properties of it, and this picture what I was talking about, this is, you see how it kind of looks like a little fine hair or something other is what it looks like in the picture here. But here's some of the properties of it. Like I told you, it naturally occurs. It has good tensile strength. In other words, it's strong. Once they get it woven together or pieced together, it holds itself. Very flexible, so it don't break. It's heat resistant. That was one of the key things that had been used for it back in the 20s, and probably maybe early when they started using it. The most common thing that we saw back then that they used it in, especially prior to or right after World War II, was they put it in ships. They were building ships, just hundreds a day, and they were spraying the inside of those ships with asbestos. And the reason is it insulated, but it was a good fire resistant. If the ship caught on fire, it wouldn't cause the metal to get damaged in the fire because it had some type of heat. It had a heat resistant. Electrical resistant. It was used widely for electrical insulation. And some of you guys that work in maintenance may have, over the years, looked at an old house somewhere that had wire in it, around the 40s, 30s, and 40s. And if you ever took that wire apart and tried to do something with it, it just fall apart. And inside of it, you would notice that these little white fibers were coming out around the insulated part of it. That was asbestos. It was very commonly used in the 30s and 40s in house wiring. They used it widely. It's good insulation again. They used it because it would last forever, and that's insulation purposes. And it was also chemical resistant. In fact, I was just down in that area last week. I didn't go by to see it, but during World War II, I used to work for the state, and I was doing training in Elizabeth City out at this company that makes these blimps. During World War II, the Navy built a station in Elizabeth City to build and launch blimps to patrol the coast. And inside this great big dome thing, it looks like a big coliseum almost, but it's got top of it. It's where they had these blimps inside of it. Inside this dome, the whole ceiling, and it's like a couple 100 feet high, is the whole inside of the thing is coated with asbestos. And when I was out there 7 or 8 years ago doing some training for them, they were talking about it. And they'd already started a project of what we call encapsulating. And they were sealing. They didn't want, it was going to cost too much to take it down, so what they were done, they were sealing it in place. They would be able to continue to use it, but it was covered, it was encapsulated. So pretty, to see that large, you think this is a big room right here, well that thing was probably, 30 or 40 times as big as this one room is right here because they have these great big lamps inside of it. And they still use that for that today, but not the Navy, it's a private company. Some of the other uses of it, the most common use that we see, what had occurred over the years was in pipe insulation, surface and insulating, reinforcing material, fireproofing, as I mentioned before, acoustic tile, decoration panels, and then some textiles. And you can see in the pictures over here, there's asbestos being used over insulated pipe, and they used it around boilers and stuff like this. That's where it was used. And of course, it said it's greatly declined since the 70s. Here are some of the more common places that we may see it. This is the fireproof, where they've sprayed metal beams and stuff like that with asbestos. They still spray these metal beams, but it's not asbestos now, the fireproof and stuff. sprayed on, but it's not no longer is asbestos. As you see in this picture right here, sheet of vinyl containing asbestos. Some of y'all are, if you're near my age, senior citizen age, you've seen that right there. And you probably grew up in a house where they had one sheet of linoleum in the kitchen, usually where you see the whole lot of bathrooms. Back prior to 1970, they made this stuff with asbestos in it. Very common. That design, I think that was actually the design that was in the kitchen I grew up in. I'm sure it was probably asbestos. The more common ones, these down here at the bottom, is your floor tiles. I'm guessing that's probably the most common thing that you can find in school somewhere. These are actually what we call 9x9s. We'll talk about those in just a minute. But that's where it was commonly used. That's where I normally see when I go out to schools and stuff. That's the most common place that I'll see asbestos that's out there is in the 9x9 tiles. The next one is some more piping. For most of you, this is not something that you would come in contact with. You know, this is probably more of someone that's doing HVAC or plumbing. You may run across this in some of your older buildings. It won't be in any of the newer buildings. When he just left, my guess is this is fairly new school, isn't it? Now, I'm going to say this one probably does not have any at all. And when he comes back, he knows more. He knows it all, where they're all at. But in an old building, you know, built back in the 30s, 40s, maybe 50s, some of the older schools, you might see something like this. But you can see where they're circling, you can see the little fibers that are sticking off from it, that's the jagged edges. And like I say, normally this is not a problem unless you're moving something around, that type of thing, or maybe you're going, that's been cut open and now you've gone in there to clean up. That may be a problem. Some of your older boiler rooms and furnaces and stuff like that might have had a thing called a mill board that was placed in there years ago. They found out it's real good insulated, it's fireproof, and they could just put it up there and nail it or screw it in or whatever, and it would insulate that boiler room. So that was something that was widely used. Of course, gaskets. I told you to make fabric out of it, and this is one of the places that we've seen the fabric was made. The people that do HVAC work, a lot of times between the systems they put flexible duct, and that's what that is. It's a piece of flex that goes in between maybe part of the ductwork that gives a little flexibility. That was at one time was made of asbestos. Now they still make these flexible ducts. It's just a little short piece. It's usually up near the air handler. But they still make this stuff that it's not asbestos. They've done away with it. Made it out of something else. You can see again on the piping. See how this was an insulation. Covers come off and it's exposed. That type of thing. Here's another one. Typically, I've not seen any schools with this. I do visit about, in North Carolina, I work with about 75 school districts across the state. And a lot of them, I do asbestos awareness training, or sometimes I go out with them, but we just do walkthroughs and we look at where there's asbestos areas. But this one, you probably would not see this one. Not likely to be in the schools. This might be something in an old building or something like that you might see that they use asbestos for roofing. One of the more common things, again, is going back to pipes. Not something you typically would be exposed to. This is outdoor piping, but they did put some asbestos around those things as well. Another one that you could run across, but in most of the schools I go to, they've already taken these out. Some of your real old schools, there is a possibility that they could have something like this inside of them, or ceiling tiles. typically says they're usually white, and they're usually 1 by 1 squares, 1 foot, 12 inches by 12 inches, or they're 2 by 4s, 2 foot by 4 foot type of thing. And if you look at them on these types of tiles, you will see that they're not the little thin ones like you see overhead up here. These are only about half an inch thick. These things here were almost an inch thick. They were real thick looking. And like I say, they had been in an older location. And I have seen these before. I have seen these real thick looking tiles before in some locations. I haven't seen them in school. I actually saw them in the church. That's where I saw that one time, that type of tile. Here's another one. This is siding. Again, I don't think you'd ever run across this in any of the schools. It'd be very rare, but you can see that this is the type of siding you put over this house. You put this probably on. You can see it starting to break apart. Here's another version of it, and then here's a group that's actually cleaning up, and you can see they're not just wearing regular stuff. They're pretty much covered up. The basics, if we're going to talk about health hazards, is getting it into your body. It's not going to harm you on your body. It's just when it gets in your body, really the problem. These are. I grew up in a house. Actually, the house is still there. Underneath the vinyl siding, there's asbestos shingles. Been on the house built back in the 40s, and that's what they used. And if y'all live in a real old house, there's probably a good chance if it's built back in the 40s, 30s, or 40s, you're going to have something like this right here because it was widely used back in that time. Another one that was very popular, again, most of this has been removed from schools. I'm not running across this one at all. Is sealing. You probably have seen this before. Back in the 60s and 70s, they would put sheetrock, and instead of painting the sheetrock, they wanted it to look pretty, and they wanted to insulate it some more, so they would spray it with this asbestos material, and it said it looked like popcorn. That's what they reminded me. It would be a real rough looking finish, and it was sprayed on. And sometimes they'd even spray walls with it as well. But you can see what happens whenever they start to move. You can see all this stuff that's laying out here in the parking lot. The sidewalk there, a lot of that is asbestos. You can see that it's breaking apart. That's where the problem is at. We'll look at that in just a minute. Another one is they used to use it in joining compounds where they put sheetrock. The compounds would be on this side over here. They would actually have asbestos inside of the compound. And then on this side, this is just plaster walls. Now you might probably, if it's anything, a plaster wall somewhere that has asbestos in it, it has been removed or it's been covered up, because in North Carolina there are, and I think pretty much across the United States, the EPA and OSHA, and also in North Carolina, the state themselves regulate asbestos in schools. There's a whole bunch of regulations that it has to be. They have to check them every 3 years. They have to document where the asbestos is at. There's procedures, and there's going to be removal of asbestos has to be done. People has to be handled in a certain way. So there's a lot of precautions that's been in place for many years that makes your job working around asbestos a whole lot safer than it might have been 30 years ago. And it says the usual suspects are sprayed on insulation, anywhere in an older mechanical room, anywhere you have exposed steel beams in your older buildings, you might see it. Some ceiling tiles we talked about, but the most common one that I see, that I run across, is your 9x9 floor tiles. And just because they're you can't say, well, only 9x9s have asbestos. There are some older floor tiles that was made back in the 70s that was 12x12. I have seen a few paint this picture. I went to a school district down in the eastern part of the state. Their maintenance shop is an old school building. That school was built in the 20s. And the maintenance needed somewhere where they could spread out because they didn't have enough room in the little building they were in. And so they had this school that was sitting out there. They had been closed for many years, so they decided to move into that school building. And so I went out there to do some training for them and also get them prepared for an OSHA inspection because that was getting ready to come their way. And when I walked in the building, the main hall didn't look too bad. When you started looking off in the rooms, the floors were white. I mean, it looked like there was powder on the floor. I look on the bottom of my shoes were white. It was asbestos. And they really wasn't aware of it because this was not in that cycle of inspections that had to be done. Here's an old abandoned school, they're not using it, so it wasn't in the cycle of inspections like they do in these schools, in your regular school. And they were using it, not realizing that those tiles were breaking apart, they were crumbling, and it was getting asbestos all over the place. And so that when they found out, they put everything into high gear. They sent a crew in there, wiring protection. They mopped everything up, they cleaned everything up, and they went in and covered the floor tiles with wax. And the second time I went back, there was wax on the floor. I mean, they put a thick coat of wax on it. They were trying to seal it, which they did a good job. That was their first thing they done. I went back just recently, and they had actually covered the floor with another floor, which that was completely encapsulating that asbestos. They just left it where it's at. Not going to hurt anything as long as it's down underneath there and it's not disturbed. And so now, they've got rid of the hazard, but because it wasn't in the cycle of inspections, it's an old building, it's not being used anymore. They really didn't think about it until they got in there and started moving around, and that's when these floor tiles started to break up. So it's like I say, every time I left the building, I was outside the parking lot, stomping my feet, trying to get the asbestos fibers off the bottom of my feet. Every time I left, and of course, I tell people probably, because I grew up in the 50s and 60s as a small child, I probably was exposed to asbestos just growing up. Probably after I got up into the 60s and 70s and started working places, and especially your older buildings, I was probably exposed to asbestos. I'm sure the old school that I went to elementary school in had asbestos in it. I know the new school I went to, because it was built in 65, the high school was built, I think, 65 or 68. It probably had some asbestos in it. But probably over my years, I probably have been exposed to asbestos. Hopefully not too much, but I probably have some, and we're going to talk about exposure. So I probably still have asbestos in my body today. Not a lot, but I say I grew up in a house that had that asbestos siding on the outside of it, which is, as long as it didn't break it, it was okay. Also, let me back up there, interior fire doors. Your older buildings, actually, they put asbestos inside the door, inside your, like a fire door. That's a fire door. Those doors back there are fire doors. It has a little plate on it that tells you it is a fire door. Now, they don't put it in there anymore. They put something else in there. Of course, those are wooden doors up there, but they probably have a barrier inside of them. But in the older school doors in older schools, inside the door itself, probably had an asbestos sheet in there. It's not going to hurt a thing inside the door. But if you're doing repairing that door, maybe changing the door lock, the door's falling apart and you're taking it down or something like that, you need to, you make sure that you know, that you're not disturbing that door. You know, you want to keep it intact. There are two terms out there. When you may see this, and I will mention too, now that Ben's back, he's going to need to ask any questions. In every school, at the front office, there's a book that tells you if there's any asbestos in that school and where it's located at.
Right.
And if it's not any there, it still will be a book there, and it'll say there's no asbestos.
Right.
That's correct.
Right.
So if you, and that's something that if you don't know, if it's a school that you work at, now I know maintenance works at all of them. You know, they're all over the place. But custodial, I reckon y'all are assigned certain schools that you work. Is that correct?
Right.
You got your school. If you've never looked at that book, I would take the time just to go look at it. Go look at that book and find, if you don't already know, where asbestos is located in your facility. Like I say, it'll tell you exactly where the location's at. It'll tell you what it may. You'll be able to identify where that asbestos is at. Anybody can do it. I mean, I can walk in there and look at those books and be able to find it within just a few minutes if there was any in this building, and I doubt if there's any in this particular facility. But it will tell you if it's asbestos-containing material, and if it's anywhere 1% by volume, weight, it is considered asbestos-containing material. Soon, asbestos-containing material. This is just where you have to just assume that there is asbestos in that material because it was installed prior to 1981. This is going to be surface material, your thermal systems like your HVAC rooms, insulation, and possibly floor built before 1981, possibly the floor. I like to treat all of them as just, if it was prior to 1981, just be careful with it, but if you're not sure, you go look at that book because the state does require every 3 years to go through and determine where all your asbestos is located at. In some cases, they require them to test. So they may take a piece of floor tile, and actually take a piece of it off and send it off to the lab to test it to see if there is any asbestos in it. It doesn't take long to figure out if it does because you put it under a microscope. You'll be able to tell right away if it has asbestos in it. Communication. Here we go. Warning signs and stuff like this. You may see this show up in some places. You may see, especially around water rooms where there's pipes and stuff like that. You may see these signs. If you ever see a sign that says danger, asbestos, authorized personnel only, that's it's just a reminder for you to stay away from it. They'll be out there on pipes and things like that. Sometimes buildings will have, and this is mainly for fire departments, they'll have a little sticker usually at the fire alarm, at the fire annunciator panel, somewhere like that. They'll put a sticker up there to it's to communicate to the fire department if there was a fire in the building, that there's asbestos in there. Years ago, you used to be able to, if you had an old building or an old house on your property, you could go out there and set it on fire and burn it, and then, dig a big old hole and bury the rest. In today's world, they won't allow you to do that. You can't set a building on fire. Somebody has to come out and look at it and make sure there's no asbestos in there. Because I told you the properties, it was real strong. You take a building full of asbestos and burn it to the ground, and the only thing you got left over is ashes and asbestos. Everything, anything there that'll burn is gone. Now you just got a pile of asbestos, and that's what they don't want to happen. There's just another picture under a piece of pipe. And they still use a lot of this. There's still a lot of this around some of your older buildings, and you can see it's completely covered, it's encapsulated. And as long as, you go in a room like that, there's no danger whatsoever, as long as it's intact, like you see, like that right there. Here's just another picture of some pipes that have been covered. As long as you don't disturb them, they're spray on those pipes or anything like that. It says, when is asbestos dangerous? You know, when it becomes friable. In other words, it starts to break apart. That's where I keep saying this word encapsulation. In other words, you're sealing it. When it was made, it was pretty much built into the product. It was pretty much sealed in there. It's encapsulated. But what happens over a period of years is that floor tile, or the most common thing, you know, starts to get brittle. The asbestos doesn't get brittle, but the other stuff that's holding it together gets brittle. It starts cracking, and that's when you get this friable fiber that comes out of there. And you can see in the picture here, see that he's got it on his hand. So like I say, get asbestos on your hand, it's not going to hurt you. It's when it gets into your lungs, into your body is the problem. And that stuff floats through the air finally fairly well because it's so fine. You know, once you get it stirred up, you can just be floating through the air. You can hardly see it at all. The bottom down here is what you see normally. It's the floor tile or vinyl floor. You see how it's just cracking up. I know you've seen the floor tile do this before. That type of thing. It says when it's dangerous, it says that, you know, asbestos contained in ceiling tiles and floor tiles, whenever they're damaged, could be, you know, shingles, fire doors, as long as they're sealed up and they're not disturbed, they're not going to be releasing anything. But anytime you drill into them, saw into them, hit them, any type of thing like that, it's going to be a problem. Other damage occurs, you know, it says any type of damage or deterioration. We see more deterioration from anything else, but there's other things that can cause that product to become damaged, and that's water, vibration. We already talked about the aging of the product. And then again, grinding, drilling, buffing, stuff like that, cutting. Any of these things could cause those fibers to come out of that. And we're going to talk about the health hazard piece of it. As far as the inhalation of asbestos, you know, it talks about airborne asbestos fibers inhaled deeply into the lungs and cause damage. It talks about tiny breathable asbestos fibers are deposited into your air sac. And the thing about the asbestos fibers, they will get, if they ever get into your lungs, they will tend to settle or work their way into the bottom part of your lungs. You can see this is where they'll, a lot of times they'll show up in the very bottom part of the lung. The body's defense mechanisms, the chemicals that our body produces to break down stuff when we get it in our bodies, will not work on asbestos. And that's what the problem is, because it's chemical resistant. The chemicals that are in our lungs and normally would break down other stuff that gets in there, it will not break down asbestos fibers. Those asbestos fibers will travel into the lower part of the lung, and they'll just lodge themselves in there, and they'll stay there forever. Here are some of the diseases. Asbestosis is probably one of the more common ones that we hear about. And I'll can only pronounce this word one time without messing it up if I can do it the first time. Mescaline alone, I never got to it. But anyway, you've heard this one on television. Probably in the last, probably within the last week. Have anybody heard that advertisement on television? That's one that they will say people that worked in the shipbuilding and certain manufacturing plants. And they're talking about somebody that's probably 70 or 80 or 90 or 100 years old. Because I don't think any of us worked in the shipyard back in the early 40s, did we? Probably not. But that's kind of what they're targeting in this group, because they were exposed to asbestos on a daily routine. Lung cancer is probably actually the most common one, but that one's, you know, you can't say because somebody got lung cancer because they were exposed to asbestos. There are other things that would cause lung cancer besides that. And it talks about other cancers. Asbestos, just because if you breathe it in, all of it don't always go into the lung. It can go into the stomach. If it goes into the stomach, there is a possibility that it will actually pass through the body. But there also is a possibility that it will stay in the body because it depends on what part of the system it goes through. If it has to travel through the kidneys, then it may lodge itself there. It says the symptoms usually take 15 to 30 years. Someone asked me a while back, so, well, if they knew this was that bad, why did they let them use it? Well, you saw in the very beginning, they started banning this stuff in the 70s. OSHA, which is the safety and health regulations in the United States, started in 1970. I don't know when the EPA started, but my guess is it didn't start until about 1970. So these government agencies that began to look at these things did not realize it was a problem. Somebody working in the shipbuilding in the 40s, it didn't start showing up and help until they got into the 70s. So that's when they really started to realize, hey, this stuff's not working. This is causing problems. It says that, and it gives you just another picture of what it looks like getting down into the lungs and breathing in. We talk about health effects. Again, I said it's hard for that asbestos to be destroyed once it enters the body, especially when it gets into the lungs. It says it can remain in place and cause diseases. We talk about what those diseases they are, the three primary ones. Also, asbestos is a serious chronic and non-cancerous respiratory disease. Some people actually that's been exposed to asbestos may not contract lung cancer, asbestosis, something like that, but they may have part of their lung is not working, so they have breathing like COPD, that type of thing, where they have diminished lung function, they're not able to breathe, get as much air in. It causes that scarring of the tissue, and when that scar tissue occurs in the lungs, you're not able to transfer oxygen. And some of the things that says the symptoms of it is shortness of breath, a dry crackling sound in the lungs when you inhale, advanced stages cause cardiac failure, and difficult to breathe. So there's different things that come out of this. There's no effective treatment for asbestosis. Disease is usually disabling. Asbestosis is pretty much diminishing lung function. The risk of asbestos is minimal for those who do not work with asbestos. Like I say, or if you had someone in your family that worked in a factory that used asbestos, if they don't normally bring it home to you, it don't work that way. The other part that we have to mention is required in the training of asbestos awareness is talking about the association of people who smoke and asbestos. This is not to condemn smoking in any way. Just to tell you there is a relationship between the two. And one of the main reasons it talks about what happens when a person smokes is it paralyzes the cells that are in your trachea and your bronchia. What happens is that whenever you breathe stuff in and it goes down into your trachea or and head down towards your lungs, when you smoke, it paralyzes the ability for that stuff to come back out and go down into your stomach and pass through your body. It causes an escalator action effect. What happens is you get something in there and it lodges in there, and for people that don't smoke, it will actually work itself back up and drop down into your stomach and then pass on through the body. The problem is a person that does smoke, it tends to paralyze that escalator action in your throat, and that stuff doesn't come back up, it just settles back down into your lungs. And says that the mechanism designed to remove particles from the lung when depositing them into your digestive system passes away. And again, those smokers, that effect is paralyzed. They want us to show the difference, in no exposure when it comes to lung cancer. No exposure, you're 70 times per 100,000 have a death of lung cancer. If you're exposed to we're exposed to asbestos, you're 5 times higher risk than the general population. A person that smokes is 10 times at higher risk of having lung cancer. And a person that smokes and is exposed to asbestos is 50 to 90 times higher to have lung cancer. It talks about lung cancer itself. It's one of the largest number of deaths. Lung cancer causes the largest number of deaths related to asbestos exposure. Evidence of lung cancer in people who are directly involved in mining, milling, manufacturing, use of asbestos products. They're much higher general population, probably nothing that none of us have ever done. But there are certain occupations like the mining, and there's a little video or some pictures of a guy that worked in one of the vinyl floor tiling companies back in the 70s. He worked there, went to work there when he was about 25 or 30. And they were, at that time, they were putting asbestos in the floor tile. He worked there about 10 years and died. And they got a picture of him that's out there. It shows what he looked like when he went to work. It shows what he looked like right before he died. It didn't look like the same person. But now he was exposed to it day in, day out. Nothing that we would ever even come close to. And the most common symptoms of lung cancer, of course, is coughing and changes in breathing. Other symptoms, shortness of breath, persistent chest pain, hoarseness, and that type of thing. You know, there's other things that causes lung cancer. And there's sometimes people that don't smoke and it's not exposed to anything develop lung cancer. So it's not, you know, it's not limited to asbestos is what causes it. Because the reason I say that is, I was doing a training last year for a small school district down in the eastern part of the state. And when I got done, this lady come up and she was convinced that she had asbestosis. After what I said in my presentation, she had all the symptoms. And she was convinced that she had it. And she was a custodian. She was convinced she had it. I don't hardly see how she could have, because they only had a high school and maybe a couple of middle schools, a couple of elementary schools, and they were all fairly new. I don't, you know, if she got it somewhere else. I think, you know, she was coughing a lot and stuff like that, and I think she had something else going on. Talk about, you know, custodial and light maintenance work, housekeeping, building maintenance, may expose workers to asbestos fibers if it's disturbed. Again, that's the key to the whole thing. Is it disturbed? If it's not disturbed, you don't have nothing to worry about. You know, you can walk on it, you can stand on it, you can do all kinds of things to it as long as you don't disturb it, as long as you don't break it apart. Activities that you could be concerned about, and that's where you need to look at the book, know if you're going into a room and do some cleaning or do some maintenance work. You're going to be sweeping, vacuuming, cleaning, changing the lights if it's in the ceiling tiles, which is not likely. You'd want to be, you know, make sure that you protect yourself. Main materials to be concerned about is the vinyl floor tile. If there was, I don't think we have popcorn ceilings, exposed piping, and exposed fireproofing. Probably the two main things that you'd ever run across would be a few pipes and floor tiles. Is that right, Wynn?
Yes.
Ceiling tile, we do have some schools have spray on the ceiling, concrete decking.
Yeah. Outside.
Inside,
Inside. Yeah.
fairground, welcome,
Yeah. You're old.
old school beach tables.
Yeah. That's again, you need to know if you're, you know, as long as it's there and it's undisturbed, it's not going to hurt a thing. That's the main thing, undisturbed. Here's some stuff that you don't want to do. Disturbing asbestos with replacing light bulbs, like in an overhead light fixture. pinning or hanging pictures, anything you might be, drilling into a wall or something like that that might have asbestos in it, you don't want to do that. The other one is talking about dry dusting or sweeping surfaces of ceiling, walls, and floors. There's one thing about this is when it's wet, it's not as friable. You can keep it down. But if you do it dry, that's when it tends to fly through the air. And of course, if you were sanding, floor tiles or anything like that, is another thing you don't want to do. If you do have to vacuum it up, they recommend using the HIPAA filter vacuum to clean up the asbestos debris. If you have any, I'm guessing y'all have vacuum cleaners that are set like that, that have the HIPAA filters on them. That was the way, that filter will capture that, and it won't blow it back out. Like a lot of vacuum cleaners, a lot of times you'll see vacuum stuff up, and some of it still comes out. This filter in there will filter that out. The other one, if you think there's anything there that might have a little where there's something broke up, if you've got a damp cloth, or if you wet it first, this is an example there of mopping the floor. If it's wet, it won't fly through the air because it will tend to stick together, and then you can clean it up without being exposed to it. Now I'll end with this one right here. I don't know where y'all knew this or not, but it's Stephen Queen, and I did not know this until a while back. I was running across some information. He died of mesothelioma alone. I think I got said it right that time. I did not know that. 1980, at the age of 50, is when he died. He was exposed to asbestos from work and his hobbies. Brake pads on automobiles in probably 1970s, sometime in 70s, the equipment was put them in there. But prior to that, brake pads, that's one of the main ingredients was to make them last long. I told you, growing up as a kid in the 60s and early 70s, I spent almost every day messing with an old car somewhere. And I'm sure I, took a few brake pads off. The old, not the pads, but the shoes, was on the older cars. And of course, he was a big car person. He had a race team, all kinds of stuff. He was a big car person. He worked in construction. He worked in the shipyard. I didn't know that about him. I always thought he was an actor. But he died of mesothelioma at age 50. Any questions on asbestos? Like I say, if you're not sure, Wynn's got the, could help you if you're not sure how to look at the books. They are, every school has them in the front office. You've got a copy in your office, and you said there was something somewhere else. Main office. There's a copy of it, so it's not something that's hidden. It doesn't take long to find them. A lot of times, I'll walk into a school just to see if they know where it's at. I'll ask them where the asbestos book is at, and just kind of see. And a lot of times they'll pull it right out. They'll know right away where it's at. Like I say, if it's not any in that school, when you do have schools that don't have it, I just said probably this one. I don't want it to spill. It looks like it's fairly new. Do you have any in this one? Do you think?
I think there's a little bit, but it's not like the older school.
Yeah. The older is where you're going to have a chance of having more of it. Any questions at all? If not, I'm sure y'all contact Wynn and he'll be able to answer it. He's been involved with it many years. He knows as much about it as anybody does. You probably go around with people that do the inspections.
Tim goes with it. Tim goes around with it.
Okay. All right, so you use somebody from the outside?
Yeah, he's outside contractor, do our reinspection.
Yeah, that has to be somebody that's certified to do that, to do the inspection. You can't just do it, you can't just say, well, I'm going to walk to the school and inspect it. It has to be done. Has the training, I can't remember how long it takes, several hours to be certified to be an inspector. All right.
With that being said, if, we have people coming in and putting in cameras, doing work above our ceilings, if you see someone in there, you need to be sure that they are aware if there's any asbestos in the area that works. They should care less, they don't know what it is. Okay? Same with the old schools, you got the floor tile. You see someone in there working, make sure they know that's asbestos floor tile. Okay?
I'm done.